Hi, this is Siofra's Magic Alcove, and I am Siofra Bradigan. So, a few of you wrote in and asked if we would do an update or if we were going to ever do an update on the Enochian workings that we've been getting ready for. So, I thought I'd let you know a little bit about that. We're still making some items. It's a very complex system, as those who are trying to do it, I'm sure, fully understand, and life often gets in the way of preparation. But I have finished the red silk headbands like this that we're going to be using, and the red silk cloth to go on the altar, so that when we're ready to do this, we can get to it. And we did make a contact with the first angel intelligence that decided we should work with it first. We did a session in the temple to first figure out which tablet we wanted to start off with, and the earth tablet seemed to be the clear choice because it kept yelling earth, earth, earth in my head. So I thought, okay, that must be the one. And then one of the beings in the air quarter of the earth tablet decided it would be the first one to work with. And so what I did was I made a larger version of its seal right there, and the letter in the center is pronounced ah or ah. And it decided it liked ah better when I was communicating with it, and there's an actual tone that went with it. So it like sung its letter or its name. So it's an individual angel. It only has the one letter, and it has 2 air, 1 earth, and 1 water in the around it, which means that says something about its qualities. So it has more air than it does the other, and it doesn't have any water in it. So everyone's going to be slightly different. And I did, when I made this, I actually put this under my pillow. I would stare at it at night before going to sleep and put it under my pillow. And I actually got direct contact with this particular form. And it was interesting because there was a lot of movement, and an upside down, like a beehive on its head, and a few other things like that. So it seems like it's certainly willing to communicate with us, but we can't really start the workings until we have the rest of the stuff made. My husband's still working on the scrying tool itself. He's got to start on it, but he's doing some research and deciding exactly what he wants to have on it. And he's in my opinion, the expert on that. So go by what he says. So that's the update on that. And we're going to talk about creating sacred space, which actually has something to do with this as well. That's going to be our main subject for the day. And I thought I'd show you my little project that I did while we're all in quarantine. I got some dowels from Walmart and put them together in this, pentagram or pentacle, depending, and colored them with the appropriate colors for the elements. So purple for spirit, aqua for water, red for fire, green for earth, and blue for air. And I'm going to put this in my window just because I want to. I think if my neighbors are paying attention to my yard decorations, they should be able to figure out that I'm a witch. But just in case they're not 100% sure, I think maybe this will put them over the edge. But anyway, so creating sacred space is both simple and complex. It depends on what the purpose is of your sacred space. And in ancient times, you didn't have to worry about that because the people got together and they dedicated an entire temple, built wonderful structures where the whole structure was just dedicated to the worship of sometimes one god or goddess, and then sometimes some minor deities or other deities associated with them might be involved in that in different parts of it. And they had their own clergy, priests and priestesses, and depending on the deity, sometimes all female, sometimes all male, sometimes a combination of both. And so when people went into these places, then they didn't have they didn't have to try and do anything in order to personally to get in touch with that energy, because the building and the acolytes, devotees, priestesses, and priests were there doing all that stuff pretty much 24 hours a day. It was an entire thing that you did for a lifetime. You were chosen for it, or it chose you, or however that worked. The churches nowadays, the Catholic Church in particular, still maintains some of that feeling. I don't know how many of you have gone into one of the large cathedrals, like in Washington, D.C., the National Cathedral that's there, and some of the other cathedrals around the world. Whether you're a member of their religion or not, you know that there's an energy that's present in the building. And that's because of the iconic art, the care that's taken with them, the prayers and devotions and stuff like that that are done to them. So that is definitely one of the main ways civilizations and cultures have created sacred space for general purpose use, and dedicated it to specific types of energy. But when you're trying to create sacred space in your own home, which a lot of us are, because pagans don't have these centralized locations much anymore. I think that there's revivals in Greece and in the Netherlands and Norway, trying to create these more central, dedicated, devoted temples and spaces and that kind of thing, and get them more active again. But as a whole, pagans around the world are fairly spread apart. So what I'm talking about are the generalized things that anybody can do. The specifics depend upon your goal, the deity that you're working with, the space that you have available for you in order to create the sacred space, all those things. So first off, when you're getting an object, if you are a person who uses tools like I do, and you buy your athame, make your wand, find a special rock or whatever, and you're building your first altar. Altars are like mini sacred spaces. They're a focal point for your attention, your work, and the different things that you're doing with it. And so when you're creating your altar, it's an important thing that you're doing. You're building a relationship. The symbols and the objects that you use should have specific significance to you as an individual, and how you feel about them and how you treat them is what creates them as being sacred objects, because then they are important to you particularly. And that's why we talked about magical etiquette in the last video, because we wanted to set the stage for there's more etiquette involved when you're doing magic, and it's not just with people interfering with your stuff or not understanding your traditions, but it's also how you interact with your objects, and then how you interact with the spirits and beings that are associated with your workings. So the first thing is when you're collecting or acquiring objects. Years back, I think it was in Starhawk's book, she mentioned the idea that if you're going to be buying something for magical purposes, it's not a good idea to haggle the price. And the reason for that is it tells the universe that you don't value either the workmanship that someone else has put into, or you don't value the object. If you feel that you have to dicker and get it get it cheaper, then it's a cheaper object in a more intrinsic way than just how much you can afford. So I thought that made sense to me, and that has been definitely something that I have followed, one of my own personal approaches to things. So if I see something that I really, really want and I can't afford it, I don't buy it, because if I can't afford it now, maybe I can afford it later, or if I got it for less, then it wouldn't work as well for me. So that's something you have to decide. And we had a gentleman that moved into our community a few years back, and he was homeless for a fair amount of the time that he was here. So he wasn't a person of means, for sure. He was interested in paganism and witchcraft and et cetera, et cetera. And he would go into, the rock shows or the stores around the neighborhood, around our area, and then he would never pay whatever the advertised price was. He would talk them down, and then he would come back and he would brag about how little he paid for this great crystal. And I know from my encounter with him how the poor vendors probably felt about his presence. They were mostly trying to get him away from their table because he was a very annoying person. Just annoying to be around, annoying to interact with, and clueless about how everybody felt about what he was doing. But it really sort of put into perspective that whole notion that his stuff didn't mean much to him because he actually didn't do much to get it except annoy people. So the energy attached to the object now is this one of his pride and ego of how great he was because he managed to get it for less, and then the person who had it before him that was selling its annoyance about how little he valued them, their time, and the object. So it's like not a good combination. If you're going to start to create a sacred object, you've already got like a deficit. And if you're that, if that's your approach to start with, I don't expect much is going to happen. It just doesn't seem to work very well. So again, it's not the specific of the object, but it's how you feel about it and how you treat it. So if you take your sacred knife and you throw it on the floor and you let other people play with it or whatever, it's no longer really a sacred knife. It's just a knife. And when you're buying one in a store, it's not an athame when you're buying it in the store because it's just a knife in the store. You buy that, you like the design, you like the pattern, it feels right in your hand, whatever, and then you make it yours, and then it becomes sacred because you bless it, you consecrate it, you cleanse it, you charge it, you use it, and all these actions are the things that create the energy around it. And you're developing a relationship with a part of your unconscious and your subconscious, that part of you that knows that magic is real. Because our conscious mind often tries to sort of block us from accepting that kind of magical reality. But the unconscious and the subconscious relate to symbolism just like a child relates to symbolism, and just like you have dreams that are symbolic. It's the language of that part of your brain. And the better able you are to create the right environment for it, the more access you have to it, the stronger you become and the more things happen. So in the beginning, we have lots of stuff now. I've been at this, for more than 50 years, and people give me things because they don't have money, but they have an object that they care about, and they give it to me as a form of appreciation. I have a lot of those things on my altars around the house and in the temple, so that's because I've been at it for so long at this point. And in the beginning, you don't need much. You just need things that will help to tap into that part of your brain, that will help you think about the world in a different way, with this spirit behind the world instead of just the physical things of the world. So a first altar can be as simple as 2 candles, one for the god and the goddess, a bowl of salt, a shell, a cup of water, and you've got everything you need because you light the candles, so you have fire. It's like, it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be expensive or whatever, It's just how you feel about it.
You know how I put it? You have to have a special respect for your magical tools in order to keep them.
Well, that's pretty much what I'm saying.
That's what you're saying. You just
Yeah.
phrase it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, so, but then there's another layer to this. So you have your objects that you have a connection with and that you're treating in the correct manner and developing that energetic link between you. But now you want to use those tools and want to use them to connect to something that's outside of yourself. And so then there's like understanding what kind of forces of nature or planetary forces or whatever it is that's out there that you are trying to connect with. And each group of spirits or beings or gods or goddesses have their own particular tastes, their likes, their dislikes. You're not going to be using the same kind of approach to, say, working with a fire goddess as you would working with an earth god. You know, it's like there's very different feels to them. And so understanding the nature of the spirits that you're working with helps you to set the environment for them, because, you know, you can survive here. This is your air, this is your space, this is your energy, and so forth. So you don't have to do much in order to survive in it. You're already sort of adapted to that. But if you're going to call on a spirit or interact with a being and you want to have a one-on-one conversation with them, it's like you're inviting a guest over to your house and you want to find out if you're going to cook them food. Do they have any food allergies or sensitivities? If they're coming to your house, are there other things that might irritate them? Are they allergic to your favorite air freshener? You know, and should you unplug that air freshener when they come over, because otherwise you have a sneezing companion running around? So just like that kind of thing, you have to learn how to create the right atmosphere with them. So respecting the being's likes and dislikes goes a long way. I mean, you can make mistakes. It's not like, you know, it's the end of the world. But you're going to get the best level of communication with a spirit if you know more about it. Like with the Enochian stuff that we're doing, these guys are finicky. They are very picky about everything. They have all these instructions that you need to follow if you want to make them feel welcome. And so that's why we're going to all the trouble to create these things, the tablets and, you know, and the objects and the items that we need for doing the workings. It's not because we want to spend a lot of time making these things, or I have an overwhelming desire to just to spend years in some cases creating these things, because they're not for me. They're actually for the beings I'm trying to communicate with and to help me adapt to them, to their environment, to their requirements and their energetic vibration. And, you know, some people aren't going to want to go through the trouble of that. There's certainly plenty of ways to, you know, and different beings interact that don't take this level of commitment and adjustment and learning and everything else. But it's a good example. And a lot of religions have those things. Like in Santa Rita, there are houses for the gods that you get when you become a dedicated member of the religion. And then that house for that particular deity has requirements. You have to feed it certain things at certain times of the day, and only certain things. You have to like give those things every week or every day, depending on the deity. And if you don't, then there's consequences and they get upset. You know, so do your research if you're going to use someone else's magic and want to get into it, to understand what the things might be. And having approaching an unknown spirit, which I get fairly often. I have spirit beings that come in and just have a look and say, oh, look, you are there. And I'm like, oh, look, you are there. And what are you? And whatnot. So being respectful of a being has decided to take an interest in you. You don't have to go along with whatever they want. That's something you have to remember. Just because a being comes in and says, tap, tap, you're mine, Doesn't mean that you have to go like, okay, I give in, I'm yours, because it has to be mutual in order for it to actually be respectful. I mean, you don't want to be a slave to some spirit that's decided to take a fancy to see if he can create some kind of human slave. It's like you have free will when it comes to this. But if you approach a spirit with fear, anger, or loathing and distrust, then they're much more likely to respond in kind and get aggravated at you, because their communication is on a different level, a different wavelength. And you can't, like with regular people who are most of the time just walking around doing their own thing, you can say a lie as a nicety, like, oh, I hope you're having a good time, or isn't that nice for you, or whatever, and not necessarily mean it. And depending on their ability to feel you out, they might just accept it at face value, and that's it, because you don't have that kind of a close relationship. But with spirits, even if you've never met them before, they usually can tell if you're sincere. And since this is all about creating a personal relationship with the universe, and they are representative of that universe, it's important how you treat them. And it's also important to have boundaries for yourself. You want to create your own personal boundaries, energetic boundaries, and know that you don't have to do anything you feel uncomfortable with, because this is your body. As a medium, I had to deal with that. So, it's like, met a woman who came into our house one day looking for the possibility of joining up with our group, and told us that she was a medium, and she just decided to fly herself wide open and let anything that wanted to come in just have a sit down and see what it was like. And we're like, okay, we need to get you out of our house because I'm sorry, that's not okay with us. We don't just want anybody to come in. And so that's another thing about creating sacred space in your home, is you automatically reject certain types of spirits. If you're creating an environment that has one kind of energy to it, then spirits that aren't comfortable with that energy will naturally be repelled by your space. And that's been my approach. I don't like put up circles and stuff like that to protect myself so much as I do to contain energy and to work with energy and keep things going. But because of the energy I work with, I know that there are spirits out there who just really don't like me at all. They see me coming and they like go the other way because they know who I am and they don't like who I am or what I put out. So, it's not a matter of trying to protect myself by violently pushing things away from me. It's by changing my atmosphere, my personal atmosphere, to the point where I know what types of spirit beings are going to be attracted to it, and I'm okay with those particular kinds of beings. So, creating your own ritual space is easy and complex, and there's lots and lots of layers to it, like there is to everything else. So, it's a subject that people ask a lot of questions about, and there's no one answer. There's no one book you can buy that will tell you how to do it. It's a matter of commitment and putting your energy into what you're doing, and your attention and awareness into what you're doing, and then respecting what you're doing. So I guess that's it for now, and I'll talk to you next week. This is Siofra Bradigan, and this has been Siofra's Magic Alcove. Blessed be.